They questioned her daughter before they questioned her. An 11-year-old sitting alone in a room with federal agents, calm, precise, revealing nothing. Quiet. Unafraid. Laura Marshall didn't know it yet, but the night she helped a stranger wasn't over. That single decision, the one that felt small, was already moving through systems designed to crush people like her. It was already too late to stop. She had 45 seconds to make a decision that would put her name in 6 Interpol databases. She didn't know that. That's the only reason she stopped. Laura Marshall was 3 blocks from home, $60 from payday, and 11 years deep into the one rule she'd never once broken: don't let other people's disasters become yours. She'd learned it the way you learn everything worth knowing, through the specific, unhurried pain of learning it too late. The father who borrowed money and disappeared. The husband who left when Maya was 4 months old. A city that had spent decades teaching its residents that mercy is a currency only fools spend freely. The rule had held through eviction notices and double shifts and the school lunch debt she paid in packed sandwiches at 5 a.m. because she refused to let Maya feel it. 11 years. Not once broken. She walked past the man in the alley. Korean. Mid-30s. Wearing a suit that cost more than her rent, now soaked through and ruined, propped against a dumpster with a bottle of soju and the boneless stillness of someone who had run completely out of runway. She made it 5 steps. Then she heard the sirens. Not the ordinary kind, not the passing through frequency of a city doing its usual business at midnight. These were the close kind. The closing kind. 2 blocks north, moving fast, with the specific urgency of a search in progress. And something else, a black SUV parked half a block south, engine still warm, 2 silhouettes in the front seat going perfectly still as she passed. That particular stillness of people trying very hard not to be noticed. The instinct that had kept Maya safe for 11 years, the one that read danger in a room before anyone spoke, said it quietly, the way it always said things. Those men aren't looking for a drunk. They're looking for this one. Specifically. She had 15 seconds left. She used them to turn around. What Laura Marshall could not have known, what she was not meant to know until it was far too late to unknow it, was that the man now unconscious against her shoulder was Kyungsoo. A name that made Interpol analysts in Seoul, Tokyo, Frankfurt, Dubai, Sao Paulo, and Chicago push back from their desks and pick up their phones. The man whose face lived in 6 law enforcement databases under 6 different aliases. The man that 17 officers were, at that exact moment, actively searching for in a 6-block radius. She'd just pulled him off the street. Moving a 180-pound unconscious man is not cinematic. It's logistics, his arm over her shoulder, his weight shifted to her stronger left side, the calculation of whether she can reach her building before the sirens reach this block. Her mouth ran as they moved, it always did when she was scared. She talked to him about nothing. Told him to stay with her. He gave no response except the shallow rhythm of his breathing. She flagged a cab, not an Uber. She deleted the app when Maya's school trip cleared, and paid her last $23 without hesitation. The driver looked at the situation once and did not ask a single question. Some neighborhoods teach you when to ask and when to drive. 2 flights of stairs. Her work shoes slipping on the wet tiles. The door to 3B, which always sticks, giving way with the specific hip check she'd perfected over 3 years. Inside, the lavender smell of the plug-in she used to cover the building's mildew, Maya's drawings on the refrigerator, the school calendar with its gold stars. She positioned him on the couch on his side, the way her training demanded, and went to check on her daughter first. Still sleeping. Gerald, the stuffed elephant, tucked under one arm. Safe. First aid kit. The flashlight on her phone. His pupils responded normally, intoxication and exhaustion, no concussion. A bruise was forming along his jaw, fresh enough that it hadn't finished yet. His knuckles were split over older scarring. The hands of a man who had been in this kind of trouble before. She cleaned a cut above his eyebrow and sat back in the armchair across from him, her denim jacket still soaked, and let herself feel the full weight of her broken rule. He shifted in his sleep. Something fell from the inside pocket of his jacket. She picked it up and held it in the kitchen light. A card. Black. Matte. One name in silver lettering, Kyungsoo. One phone number. No company. No title. No explanation. She put it on the kitchen counter. Told herself she'd throw it away in the morning. What Laura didn't know, sitting in her armchair at 12:30 a.m. in her wet jacket with her broken rule, was that Kyungsoo had been counting. 17 people had passed that alley between 9 p.m. and midnight. He'd registered every one. The couple who walked faster. The delivery driver who slowed and kept moving. The man who looked directly at him and crossed the street. 17 people who saw him and made the calculation and chose correctly. Laura Marshall was the 18th. In 6 countries, her face would register within 48 hours. Her name would appear in a file. Her daughter's school would be noted. People who had spent careers tracking Kyungsoo would begin, quietly and with great urgency, to learn everything there was to know about a night desk coordinator from Chicago's West Side who had somehow done what no one else had done. But tonight, none of that had happened yet. Tonight there was just a woman in a wet jacket, a man asleep on a worn couch, and a business card on the kitchen counter she was absolutely going to throw away in the morning. By morning, nothing would be the same. If you stay, you'll see how one small decision dismantled an entire life. Maya noticed him before Laura did. She was already awake at 6:48 a.m., sitting cross-legged on the living room floor 3 feet from the couch, sketchbook open on her knee, drawing the sleeping stranger with the unhurried focus of a child who had decided he was interesting rather than dangerous. She'd pulled her braids back with the purple scrunchie she kept on her wrist. Gerald was propped against the couch leg beside her, a silent witness. Laura appeared in the doorway still in yesterday's scrubs, 2 hours of sleep behind her eyes, and felt her heart lurch into her throat. Maya looked up. Mom. Is he Korean? He looks Korean. Also his shoes are really nice. Maya. Laura was already moving, placing herself between her daughter and the couch, not dramatically, not in a way that would alarm her. Just there. Present. A body in the right place. Go get dressed for school. I'm already dressed. Maya held up the sketchbook. She'd gotten his jaw right, and the line of his shoulder. The tattoo on his throat was rendered in careful purple pen. He looks sad even when he's asleep. The man on the couch stirred. It happened in stages, the slow surface of someone climbing up from a long way down, and then all at once, like a switch. His eyes opened, and for 4 full seconds he was completely, utterly lost. Laura watched it happen, the ceiling that wasn't his, the smell of lavender and old building, the small girl on the floor who was looking at him with frank, unafraid curiosity. Then he composed himself. 4 seconds. That was all it took. Whatever had been unguarded in his face folded away and left something controlled and precise in its place. You're awake, Laura said. Same voice she used when patients surfaced confused in unfamiliar rooms. Calm. Diagnostic. No fear in it, no expectation. How are you feeling? I should go. He sat up carefully, testing his own steadiness. I've imposed enough. You should eat first. Not a question. The same tone she used with Maya at the end of a long day, when someone needed to be told what came next because they'd run out of the capacity to decide for themselves. She moved through the kitchen with the efficiency of a woman who had been making meals out of almost nothing for 11 years. 3 eggs left in the carton. The end of a loaf of bread. Half a container of orange juice split into 2 glasses because Maya got the full one and Laura didn't think about it, she just did it, the way she always did, the smallest portion going to herself without ceremony. She set his plate in front of him before she sat down. He watched this. She didn't notice him watching. I'm Kong, he said, after a moment. Just Kong. He said it carefully, his eyes moving to her face, waiting for the flicker of recognition that always came. The slight recalibration. The shift in how people held themselves when they understood who he was. Laura, she said, pouring juice. That's Maya. Maya, mid-chew, do you know Taekwondo? I'm asking because of your hands. She pointed her fork at his knuckles with the directness of a child who had not yet learned to pretend she hadn't noticed things. Also, your tattoo is really cool. What is it? He blinked. Something moved across his face that wasn't quite any expression Laura had a name for. Olive branch, he said. It belonged to my grandmother. That's nice, Maya said seriously, and went back to her eggs. He was gone before the school bus came. He stood at the door with his jacket, dry now, but ruined, and reached for his wallet. Laura shook her head before he got there. He paused. Set the wallet back. Thank you, he said. The words were precise and weighted in a way that suggested he did not say them often, and meant them every time he did. For seeing me. Laura tilted her head. An odd thing to say. But she didn't ask. He placed something on the counter by the door. The black card, the one she'd put on the kitchen counter last night, the one she told herself she would throw away. He must have picked it up. He set it back down, square and deliberate. If you need anything, he said. He didn't explain what anything meant. He didn't need to. Then the door clicked shut behind him, and the apartment was quiet again, the particular quiet of a space that had just held more than it was built for. Laura stood in her kitchen for a long moment, listening to Maya hum to herself while packing her backpack. She looked at the card on the counter. Picked it up. Turned it over in her hand. She put it in her wallet this time. Not the junk drawer. Her wallet. She told herself it didn't mean anything. She was very good at telling herself things. 3 days passed. Life resumed its usual shape. Double shifts. Maya's homework spread across the kitchen table each evening, pencil scratching, Gerald watching from the windowsill. The landlord's voicemail she'd been ignoring for a week. The card in her wallet she'd moved twice, from the card slot to the inner zip pocket, then back, and had not thrown away and had not called. She'd almost convinced herself it was over. That it had been one night, one broken rule, no further consequence. That the sirens had gone somewhere else and found someone else and the black SUV had driven away and none of it had left a mark on anything that mattered. She was very good at convincing herself of things. Then Mrs. Chen knocked. She was 72 years old, a retired post office supervisor who read 3 newspapers daily and maintained strong opinions about everything from Chicago's pension crisis to the correct way to store winter coats. She had lived in apartment 2A for 19 years and knew everything that moved through this building and most of what moved through the block. She stood in Laura's doorway holding her tablet with the expression of a woman who had been waiting 3 days to do exactly this. You should see something, she said. Not a question. She held out the screen. Interpol red notice, Kyungsoo, suspected head of the East Pacific Consortium, wanted in connection with organized crime operations across South Korea, Japan, Germany, the UAE, Brazil, and the United States. Beneath it, a photograph. Grainy, taken from distance, the kind surveillance cameras produce when they're not meant to be noticed. But the jaw was right. The line of the shoulder. The dark eyes that had taken 4 seconds to compose themselves on her couch on a Friday morning. Laura read it once. Read it again. Then she sat down on Mrs. Chen's kitchen floor because her legs simply stopped working. Mrs. Chen did not make a sound. She set the tablet on the counter and put the kettle on, the way she handled everything that required time to process. I saw him, she said, after a moment. Coming out of your building. 3 days ago. Early. Before the school bus. A pause. I didn't tell anyone. Mrs. Chen. I've known you for 6 years, Laura Marshall. Her voice was even. Not soft, Mrs. Chen was never soft, but steady, the way a person is steady when they've already decided something and aren't interested in being talked out of it. I know what I saw and I know what I didn't see. But you should know what you're holding. She took the tablet back. The kettle began to hiss. Laura walked back to her apartment and stood in her kitchen for a long time. 6 countries. 4 aliases. The article used the phrase extraordinarily dangerous twice and organized violence once and cited Interpol coordination across 3 continents. The East Pacific Consortium, she said the name silently, testing it, hearing nothing familiar in it, had logistics networks that moved money across borders and, the article implied without quite stating, other things. The kind of things that made federal task forces and international prosecutors spend their careers in the same room. She thought about the 4 seconds. The way he'd composed himself on her couch, from lost to controlled in the time it takes to blink twice. She'd filed that away without knowing why. She knew why now. A man who has been operating across 6 countries under 6 different names has learned to be whoever the room needs him to be before the room finishes looking. She thought about the eggs. The smallest portion. The way he'd watched her set the table and gone completely still for just a moment, like something had struck him that he hadn't been prepared for. She thought about, thank you. For seeing me. An odd thing for a man wanted in 6 countries to say. Not thank you for the couch or the first aid or even the silence. For seeing me. As if that was the rarest thing. She went to her wallet. Took out the card. Held it. Black. Matte. 1 name. 1 number. No explanation. The rational thing, the safe thing, the thing her one rule demanded, was to put it in the trash. Or call the number on the article. Or do nothing and let the world handle its own problems the way it had been doing long before she got involved. She put the card back in her wallet. She didn't examine why. She was getting better at not examining things. 1 week after the Interpol article, Mr. Osei knocked on her door at 9 a.m. on a Saturday. He was a patient man. He had given Laura 3 extensions over the past 8 months and had never once made her feel the size of the debt, just slipped the notices under her door quietly and let her respond on her own timeline. She'd always responded. Never on time, but always. That was the understanding they had. He held out a receipt. His expression was the careful neutral of someone delivering news he wasn't sure how to characterize. Your account is settled, he said. 3 months. Paid in full this morning. Courier brought a cashier's check before 8. Laura looked at the receipt. Looked at him. Who paid it? Mr. Osei shrugged with the particular economy of a man who had learned not to ask questions that complicated his life. Anonymous. But paid. So. He left before she could say anything else. She stood in her doorway holding the receipt for a long time. 2 hours later, Maya's school called. The lunch balance, $147, the number Laura carried the way you carry a stone in your shoe, always there, always reminding you, had been cleared. An envelope left at the front office that morning. Cash. No name on the outside. No note inside. Laura was standing in the school parking lot when she got the call, Maya beside her, mid-sentence about a science project involving baking soda and something that had apparently made a mess of the classroom sink. Laura said thank you to the secretary and hung up and stood very still while Maya continued talking and the October wind moved through the parking lot like it had somewhere better to be. The fury arrived quietly. Not at the kindness. She understood kindness, she practiced it daily at a cost she rarely let herself calculate. The fury was at the precision of it. The rent. The lunch balance. Not a round number dropped at her door like charity. The exact amounts. The specific debts. The ones she had never written down, never mentioned to anyone, never allowed herself to discuss because discussing them made them real in a way she couldn't afford. Someone had been watching her closely enough to know exactly where she hurt. She put Maya's dinner on the table that evening and then stood at the kitchen counter with the card in front of her and stared at it for 40 minutes while Maya did homework and Gerald supervised from his spot by the backpack. She did not call. What she did was think, the specific, methodical thinking she used when a situation at the hospital desk required her to hold several facts in the air at once and find the line between them. She thought about the rent. The lunch money. The 4 seconds on the couch. The eggs. The olive branch tattoo that had belonged to his grandmother. She thought about a man who ran criminal networks across 6 countries and had sat at her table and taken the smallest portion without being asked. She could not make those 2 things fit into the same shape. Mom. She looked up. Maya had swiveled in her chair, homework abandoned, and was watching her with the focused attention she usually reserved for things she was sketching. Who's Kyungsoo? Laura's stomach dropped. Where did you hear that name? Maya held up her tablet. She'd been Googling. Of course she'd been Googling. She was 11 and she'd drawn his portrait in purple pen and she had her mother's instincts and none of her mother's practice at leaving things alone. The news says he's dangerous, Maya said. She said it the way she said most things, straightforwardly, without alarm, as if she was reporting the weather. But. She paused, looking at the screen. His shoes were really nice. Dangerous people don't usually have shoes like that. That is not how danger works, Maya. I know, Maya said, seriously. But also, the eggs. She set the tablet down. He took the small portion. He didn't have to. You always say people show you who they are in the small stuff. She shrugged with the authority of someone who considers the matter settled. I'm just saying. She went back to her homework. Laura looked at her daughter for a moment, this sharp, fearless, inconveniently perceptive child, and felt something she didn't have a clean word for. Pride, maybe. Or the particular exhaustion of being understood by someone who made understanding look effortless. She picked up the card. Put it back in her wallet. She still didn't call. But the reason she didn't had shifted, quietly, into something she was no longer sure was about the rule. Maya was right about the eggs. She was almost certainly right about the shoes. Laura was getting tired of how often a child who hadn't even started middle school was the clearest thinker in the room. They came on a Tuesday morning, for days after the anonymous payments, while Maya was at school and Laura was on her day off doing laundry. 2 of them. She knew before she opened the door, something in the cadence of the knock, too even, too deliberate, the knock of people who have been trained to sound non-threatening and have practiced until it sounds exactly like a threat. Detective Reyes was Chicago PD, sharp-featured, methodical, the kind of careful that came from years of reading rooms and people and knowing which details mattered. Agent Walsh was federal, mid-40s, the measured authority of someone who'd stopped smiling in professional contexts because he'd learned it didn't help. They held their credentials out in unison, a choreography they'd done enough times it had become automatic. Ms. Marshall. Reyes's voice was pleasant. Professionally so. We're sorry to bother you. We have a few questions, if you have a moment. About? We have a witness who places a woman matching your description with a man in the alley on the 2200 block of Keeler Avenue, approximately 10 days ago. He paused, just long enough. The man we're looking for is considered extremely dangerous. You'd be doing the right thing by talking to us. 11 years on a hospital night desk. 11 years of knowing exactly what to say to a family at 2 a.m. when the news was bad and the doctor wasn't there yet. Of managing information, what to release, what to hold, how long a silence could last before it became an answer. Of making impossible things sound manageable without lying about a single fact. Laura Marshall was very good at this particular kind of conversation. She gave them nothing. Politely. Without hostility, without visible tension, with the specific blankness of someone who had genuinely nothing to add. She didn't know anyone named Kyungsoo. She walked that route every night after her shift. She couldn't say whether she'd seen anything unusual, nights blurred together when you worked doubles. She was sorry she couldn't be more helpful. They left without a warrant. They came back 4 days later with one. Maya was at school. Laura stood in the kitchen and watched 2 agents move through her apartment with practiced efficiency, opening drawers, photographing surfaces, working with the impersonal thoroughness of people executing a task rather than searching for something specific. They photographed the junk drawer. The kitchen counter. The school calendar on the wall with its gold stars on the good days. They found nothing. Kyungsoo had left nothing, she checked, the morning after, out of an instinct she hadn't examined. No trace. Not even a depression in the couch cushion that couldn't be explained by ordinary use. The agents filed out. Reyes paused at the door. "We'll be in touch, Ms. Marshall." Still pleasant. Still professional. Still wrong in a way she could feel but not name. "It would go better for everyone if you remembered something." The door closed. The apartment held its breath. She stood at the kitchen counter for a moment before she noticed it. The business card was where she'd left it, she'd moved it from her wallet to the counter before they arrived, some instinct she hadn't questioned. But tucked behind it now was something that hadn't been there before. A small square of paper, folded once, the fold crisp and deliberate. She unfolded it. For words in Korean characters she couldn't read. And below them, in careful, precise English handwriting. "I see what you risk." He'd been here. While she was at work, or while the agents were searching, or in the window between, in whatever narrow margin he operated through. He'd come and gone and left 4 words in a language she didn't speak and then translated them because he knew she'd need to understand. She sat down at the kitchen table. Put the note beside the card. Looked at both of them for a long time while the apartment settled back into its ordinary silence around her. She thought about Reyes's parting line. The pleasant, professional menace of it. She thought about Maya at school right now, eating lunch off a balance that a man wanted in 6 countries had quietly cleared. She thought about the way the agents had photographed the gold stars on the calendar, her daughter's gold stars, evidence of nothing except that a child had a good day, and how that felt like a line being drawn. She thought about 11 years of making herself small enough that the world would leave her alone. She thought, enough. It was 1:07 a.m. when she finally said it. Maya had been asleep for 2 hours. The apartment was the particular quiet of a space that had wound down for the night, the refrigerator's low hum, the occasional sound of the building settling. Laura sat at the kitchen table with the note in front of her and the card beside it and the phone already in her hand because she hadn't put it down since he answered. They'd been circling. He'd asked if she and Maya were safe. She said yes. She asked why she should believe a single thing he said. He said, "You shouldn't." Not automatically. A pause that lasted long enough to feel deliberate. "But you called. Which means you've already decided something." "I need the truth," she said. "All of it. Not the version that makes you look better." A long silence. Then, "All right." His father had been a fisherman in Incheon. Not a romantic version of that, not nets at sunrise and the smell of the sea. The grinding kind, cold water, broken equipment, a body that wore out faster than it should have. He died when Kyungsoo was 13 of a preventable illness, the kind that is only fatal when treatment isn't affordable. Kyungsoo had watched it happen over 8 months with the helplessness of a child who understood exactly what was occurring and could do nothing about it. A man called Director Shin came to the funeral. A cousin of a cousin, a man with a good suit and the particular ease of someone who has never had to calculate anything. He said Kyungsoo's father had been his friend. That he looked after people who had nowhere else to turn. He said it the way people say things when they mean something else entirely. "I was 19 before I understood what I'd walked into," Kyungsoo said. 22 before I understood there was no walking out. He built the East Pacific Consortium over 15 years. He said it plainly, without softening it, a logistics network that moved money across borders, that ran on relationships with people who valued silence above everything, that had, in its early years, moved things he now couldn't stop thinking about. He'd been good at it. He said that plainly too. Being good at something terrible is its own particular trap. They don't let you leave because you're too useful, and you can't leave because you've become someone you don't entirely recognize. 2 years ago, he said, a young woman was found in a shipping container connected to one of my networks. I didn't order it. I didn't know it was happening. His voice stayed level, but something beneath it tightened in a way she could hear. I had told myself that the distance I kept, between myself and the worst of it, meant something. It didn't. She was 23. He'd gone to a prosecutor in Seoul named Kim Soo-young 3 weeks later. He'd been feeding her information since, carefully, at a cost he didn't specify, but that she understood from the split knuckles and the alley and the soju and the two of his own men who had tried to kill him the night before she found him. The men Interpol wants me for protecting, he said, are the men I've spent 2 years working to destroy. The red notices are accurate in their facts. They are completely wrong in their meaning. Why are you telling me this? Laura asked. The silence this time was different. Not evasive. The silence of someone choosing words because they matter, because the wrong ones would be a different kind of lie. Because you hid me from the police when you didn't know who I was, he said. You brought me into your home. You fed me at your table. You didn't ask for anything. A pause. You deserve to know exactly who I am before you decide what to do with that. Laura was quiet for a long moment. She thought about Maya asleep 10 feet away. About the gold stars on the calendar that 2 federal agents had photographed that afternoon. About 11 years of every hard decision arriving alone and staying alone until it was resolved or wasn't. The night I found you, she said. What actually happened? 2 of my own men. Someone inside my network gave them my location, the same people I've been helping to prosecute. A beat. I ran. I drank too much because I had run out of places I trusted and the soju was there. I am, underneath everything, still a man from Incheon who learned to grieve quietly. He had not expected Laura Marshall. He said that too. Simply, without decoration. She looked at the note on the table. For words in a language she didn't speak, translated by a man who understood she would need to. The police came back today with a warrant, she said. They photographed Maya's school calendar. Reyes told me it would go better for everyone if I remembered something. She kept her voice even. They're going to come for her next. I know it and you know it. Yes. So. She picked up the card. Turned it over once. Set it down. Tell me what you need. And tell me the truth about what it costs. The silence on the other end was the kind that meant someone was recalibrating, adjusting to a version of the conversation they hadn't expected to be having. You should tell me to leave, he said. You should take Maya somewhere and let this resolve itself without you. I know what I should do, Laura said. I've been doing what I should do for 11 years. I'm asking what you need. This time, he told her. The week after the phone call had its own careful rhythm. They spoke 3 more times, brief, measured conversations that grew slightly less measured each time, the way water finds its level. Kyungsoo told her the prosecutor's timeline, weeks, not months. The case against the consortium's actual leadership, 5 men who had never appeared in any database, who had always stayed behind Kyungsoo's name like it was a wall, was almost complete. He needed to stay invisible until it broke. She told him about the unmarked car that had been parked outside her building for 4 days, about the second interview request she'd declined in writing, about the call to her supervisor at Mercy General asking about her reliability and judgment. He told her to start documenting everything. Timestamps. Call logs. Every contact. She did. She had not told Maya any of this. She had told Maya that things were complicated and that Gerald should stay close and that no matter what happened at school, Maya was to call her immediately if anything felt wrong. Maya had looked at her with the focused calm of a child absorbing instructions she intends to follow. Okay, she'd said. I've got it. The call came on a Wednesday at 2:15 p.m. Principal Morrison. Her voice was careful in the way that means something has already happened that the speaker is not entirely sure they handled correctly. Ms. Marshall, I want you to know that Maya is fine. But a federal agent came to the school approximately 40 minutes ago with credentials and, we followed protocol, we believed it was proper, a pause. He's been speaking with Maya in the conference room. I thought you should know. 40 minutes. Laura was already moving before the principal finished the sentence. Jacket off the hook. Keys in hand. Down the stairs at a pace that wasn't quite running because running in the stairwell meant falling, and she could not afford to fall right now. She walked through Lincoln Elementary with the quiet, purposeful speed of someone who had stopped asking permission. The front office staff started to stand when she passed the desk. She showed her ID without breaking stride. Turned left at the gym, right at the library. She knew every corner of this building from 6 years of drop-offs and pickups and the specific geography of a school that contained her daughter. The conference room was at the end of the east corridor. She opened the door without knocking. Agent Walsh was at the head of the table. A junior agent sat beside him with a notepad and the careful blankness of someone trained not to show uncertainty. Between them, across the table, was Maya. Her hands were folded in front of her. Her face was the cooperative blankness Laura recognized as her own expression reflected back, the specific neutrality of someone who has decided to give nothing and is holding that decision with both hands. Gerald was not here. Gerald was in her backpack in her classroom. Maya had been in this room, alone, for 37 minutes. She had not said a single word. Laura could tell from Walsh's expression, the controlled frustration beneath the professional courtesy, that he'd gotten nothing. Her 11-year-old had sat across from a federal agent for 37 minutes and given him nothing. Walsh started to speak. Laura didn't let him. My daughter is 11 years old. She kept her voice completely level, not cold, not raised, the voice of someone who has arrived at a decision and is now simply delivering it. You removed her from her classroom without notifying her parent. You conducted a questioning of a minor without a guardian present, without written notification, without an attorney. You did this using the institutional authority of a federal badge in a school building. She set her phone on the table. On the screen, timestamps. Call logs. The text Kyungsoo had sent her 4 days ago, start documenting everything, every contact, every name, every time, because he had been watched by governments for 15 years and he knew exactly what they would do and exactly what she would need. I have your badge number, Agent Walsh. I have the time of your arrival at this building and the name of the administrator who let you in. I have documentation of every contact your task force has made with me, my employer, and now my child. She picked the phone back up. You will not speak to my daughter again without me present, without a warrant, and without an attorney. If you try, I will be in front of a journalist before you reach your car. Walsh held her gaze for a moment. Then he stood, collected his notepad, and left with the junior agent behind him, the measured exit of someone who has not lost and is not ready to acknowledge that he hasn't won. The door clicked shut. The room was very quiet. Maya was looking at her with the expression she usually reserved for things she was still working out. You were really calm, she said. I've had practice. Were you scared? Terrified. Laura picked up her bag. But some things are more important than being scared. Come on. Let's get Gerald. They walked back through the corridor together, Maya's hand tucked into hers, neither of them speaking until they were outside and the October air hit them both. Is Kyungsoo going to be okay? Maya asked. A beat. I'm working on it. Okay. Maya nodded, satisfied with this in the way she was satisfied with true things. Even hard ones. I told Gerald about everything this morning. Gerald thinks it's going to be fine. Laura looked at her daughter. This sharp, unfrightened child who had sat across from a federal agent for 37 minutes and given him the same thing Laura had spent 11 years giving the world, nothing it didn't earn. In the car, she called Kyungsoo before she started the engine. They went for Maya, she said, when he answered. Walsh. School conference room. 37 minutes. A pause. Tell me exactly what has to happen next and when. We're not waiting anymore. He chose the location. A rooftop in Pilsen, accessible through a door in the stairwell of a building whose owner owed him nothing and therefore couldn't be leveraged. He knew 3 escape routes from it. Laura's building was 4 minutes by cab. She came straight from a shift. Hospital badge still on, rain jacket over her scrubs, the particular exhaustion of 12 hours at the overnight desk still in the lines around her eyes. She was not going to apologize for any of that. The city spread below them in orange and white, rain turning every streetlight into a smear of color. Chicago at night, seen from above, looked like it was trying. She'd always thought that. Like the city was working very hard to be beautiful in spite of itself. Kyungsoo was already there. Dark suit, always the dark suit, she was beginning to think it was armor, his eyes clear in a way they hadn't been in the alley. He stood at the rooftop edge with his hands in his pockets and the stillness of someone who had finished deciding something and was now simply living in the consequence of that decision. He looked, she thought, like a man who had made peace with what was coming. She didn't know yet whether that was reassuring or terrifying. 48 hours, he said, without preamble. Kim Soo-young has everything. 2 years of financial records, correspondence, organizational structure, enough to bring arrest warrants for the 5 men who have never once appeared in any law enforcement database because I was always the name between them and exposure. The coordination between Seoul, Tokyo, and the U.S. Attorney's Office is in place. It breaks in 48 hours. Then what's the problem? 3 days ago, Kim Soo-jung's office was breached. Someone inside has been compromised. He turned from the edge to face her. The final evidence package, the chain of financial records that ties the 5 men directly to the consortium's worst operations, needs to reach Seoul through a channel that no one is currently watching. Every channel I have is mapped. Every contact I trust has been identified. He paused. Except one. The rain was steady against her jacket. She waited. Why me, she said. He looked at her with something she was still learning to read in his face, the expression that surfaced when he was being honest about something that cost him. Because no one has watched you this whole time, he said. You are invisible to them. You have been your entire life. A beat. I think you're tired of that. The rain came harder. Laura stood in it and thought about the alley. The cab. The $23. The card she'd moved from wallet to counter to wallet and never once thrown away. She thought about Maya's hands folded on a conference room table, giving Walsh 37 minutes of nothing. She thought about the woman she had been making herself into, smaller and smaller, for 11 years, and the woman who had apparently been underneath all that smallness the whole time, waiting. Walk me through it, she said. The package would move through Mercy General's International Medical Records Courier System, a legitimate transfer channel used daily to send patient files to foreign specialists. Invisible to any surveillance because it was entirely mundane. Laura had the access credentials. She had the institutional authority. She had the one thing the consortium had never thought to map, the professional invisibility of a night desk coordinator at a mid-sized Chicago hospital. 4:17 a.m., he said. Quietest hour of your shift. The transfer takes 11 minutes. By the time anyone realizes what moved through that channel, the warrants will already be executing in Seoul. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. She said it before she'd fully decided to say it. It surprised her slightly. It didn't seem to surprise him. Laura. Her name, careful. The way he always said it. If something goes wrong, I need you to know that what you've already done, hiding me, protecting Maya, holding through all of it, none of that disappears. Whatever happens next, you. It won't go wrong, she said. So let's stop talking about what happens if it does. She held out her hand. He looked at it for a moment, this woman in a rain jacket and a hospital badge, standing on a rooftop in the rain, holding out her hand like it was the most straightforward thing in the world. Then he took it. Not a handshake. Something steadier than that. 2 people choosing to trust each other with something irreversible. They held on for a moment that was not quite a promise and not quite anything else and exactly what it needed to be. Then they got to work. What Kyungsoo did not tell her, what he could not tell her without unraveling the careful calm he needed her to carry into the next 48 hours, was what he had understood 3 days ago, in the hour after Kim Soo-young told him her office had been breached. The leak was not random. It was not a vulnerability in the prosecutor's systems or a careless junior staffer. It was Park Jin-hyuk, his second-in-command, the man who had sat across from him at 100 operational meetings, who had known his location and his contacts and the full architecture of his cooperation with Seoul for 2 years. Jin-hyuk knew about Laura. He'd known since the night in the alley. Kyungsoo had made a mistake he almost never made. He'd been seen helping himself, which meant he'd been seen being human, which meant someone had noted a woman who'd stopped when 17 people hadn't. And now Jin-hyuk knew about the courier plan. Kyungsoo stood on the rooftop after Laura left and looked out at the city and calculated the hours he had to get between her and what was coming. 48 hours. He had been in worse positions with less time. He told himself this with the discipline of a man who had learned that the moment you stop believing you can win is the moment you've already lost. He almost believed it. 4:17 a.m. The overnight desk at Mercy General had reached its quietest hour, the particular stillness between the end of the late-night emergencies and the beginning of the early morning ones. 2 nurses at the far station. The low sound of a monitor from somewhere down the east corridor. The hum of the building doing what buildings do at 4 a.m., which is mostly just endure. Laura pulled up the International Courier interface. Standard screen. Standard fields. She had processed 43 transfers through this system in the last 8 months, patient records to specialists in London, Sao Paulo, Berlin, Tokyo. Nobody watched this channel. It was too ordinary to watch. That was the whole point. She filled in the fields. Sealed medical records. Recipient, Kim Soo-young, Prosecutor's Office, Seoul Central District Court. She entered the credentials Kyungsoo had given her, legitimate credentials, routed through a medical research partnership that had existed for 6 years and had never once been associated with anything that would draw attention. Her hands did not shake. She noted this and then stopped noting it, because there was no time and it didn't matter. She pressed send at 4:17 a.m. The transfer estimated 11 minutes. She sat at the desk and watched the progress bar and breathed. 12 hours later, while she was home, while Maya was at school, while the progress bar had long since completed and the package had long since arrived and Laura had spent most of the intervening hours pretending to sleep, Jin-hyuk made his move. 2 men to the Mercy General parking structure. Kyungsoo had anticipated this. He had understood, in the 3 days since he'd identified the leak, that Jin-hyuk would wait until the package moved and then try to intercept the chain of custody, create enough confusion to delay the warrants, buy the 5 men another 48 hours to disappear. Kyungsoo had arranged, through a contact he had never used before and would never use again, for the parking structure to be monitored. The 2 men were detained within 6 minutes of their arrival. In Seoul, 40 minutes later, Kim Soo-jung's team picked up Jin-hyuk at the airport, passport in hand, a flight booked under the 3rd of his 4 aliases, and added his interference to the evidence package as a separate count. It added to the case rather than derailing it. That was the kind of move Kyungsoo had learned to make, the ones that turned the attack into ammunition. Laura watched the press conference on her phone in the Mercy General break room at 6 a.m., still in her scrubs from a shift she'd technically completed 40 minutes ago but hadn't been able to make herself leave. She didn't understand Korean. She didn't need to. She watched the 5 names appear on the screen behind Kim Soo-young, names that had never appeared in any database, that had existed safely behind Kyungsoo's name like a wall for 15 years, and watched the prosecutor speak with the precise, controlled energy of someone who has been building toward a single moment for 2 years and has finally arrived. She watched until it was over. Then she sat in the break room for a long time with her phone in her lap and the coffee machine humming beside her and felt something shift in her chest that took her a while to name. It wasn't relief exactly. It was closer to the feeling after a long illness breaks, the strange, disoriented stillness of a body that has been in emergency mode for so long it doesn't immediately know how to stop. Her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. A woman's voice, careful English, Seoul accent, the measured authority of someone who chose every word deliberately. Ms. Marshall. My name is Kim Soo-young. I want to tell you personally what you helped accomplish today. A pause. I also want you to know that Mr. Kyungsoo's cooperation with my office is formally on record. His status has been reclassified. 3 of the 6 red notices have been reassigned. He is now a protected witness under the jurisdiction of this court. Laura said thank you. She wasn't sure what else to say, so she said it twice. Kim Soo-young said, "You should know that what you did, the risk you took for someone you had no obligation to, is not something we take lightly. Not here." The line went quiet. Laura held the phone for a moment after it ended. That evening, her kitchen smelled like the jasmine tea Kyungsoo had started making without being asked, sometime in the 4 days since the rooftop, quietly taking over the kettle the way he took over small things, without announcement, without asking permission, as if usefulness was its own kind of language and he was trying to learn hers. Maya was at the table with her homework, Gerald propped against her backpack, pencil moving steadily. She'd looked up when Kyungsoo arrived and said, "Hi," with the casual ease of someone greeting a person who had simply become part of the furniture, which was apparently what 11-year-olds did with people they'd decided were safe. Laura's phone lit up on the counter. The confirmation she'd been waiting for, a text from a number she would delete after reading, 3 words in English that meant the warrants had fully executed and the last of the 6 countries had closed its file on Kyungsoo's primary alias. She set the phone face down. Kyungsoo was watching her from across the kitchen, a mug in each hand, reading her face with the focused attention he brought to things that mattered. "Well," he said. Maya looked up from her homework. She'd been waiting too, in the way she waited for things, quietly, without fidgeting, with the patience of someone who trusted that the answer would arrive and simply needed to be present when it did. Laura looked at her daughter. Looked at this man who had come into her life like a disaster and had turned, slowly and then all at once, into something she didn't have a word for yet but recognized the shape of. "We're going to be okay," she said. It was the first time in 11 years she'd said it and believed it. Maya nodded, satisfied, the way she was satisfied with true things, and went back to her homework. "I told Gerald," she said. "Gerald's been saying that for a week." Kyungsoo set a mug on the counter beside Laura. Their hands were close but not touching, the particular proximity of 2 people who have not yet named what they are to each other and are in no hurry to, because the thing itself is already there whether or not it has a name. He looked at Gerald. At Maya. At the gold stars on the school calendar and the drawings on the refrigerator and the specific ordinary miracle of a kitchen where everyone was safe and the tea was hot and nobody was counting anything. He had not planned on Chicago. Not on a rain-soaked alley or a woman with steady hands and 11 years of practice at doing hard things alone. Not on an 11-year-old who had decided he was interesting rather than dangerous and had never once revisited that decision. He had not planned on being seen. On staying seen. On discovering that it didn't, in the end, destroy him. Some things, the best things, are never planned. They begin with one person refusing to walk past someone who needs help. And they end with a family sitting around a kitchen table, safe, in the ordinary miracle of being known. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. That choice matters more than you know. If this story stayed with you, what comes next goes even deeper, stranger, darker, and far more revealing. Stay with me. I'll see you in the next one.